Hello, welcome to my channel. Where I want. I don't know what just happened with that. My Wi-Fi maybe just decided to, hopefully that didn't go black for you guys too, but anyway, here we are. I have been MIA. Life has been lifing, and I'm gonna try to make a little return to YouTube. And normally I sit here when I'm working or when I'm recording, but I have this beautiful bookshelf that I feel like I should display more. I can have cute, cozy things playing on the TV in the background. And yeah, so I'm here. I'm excited today. Oh my gosh, that was scary. I didn't realize it had the movable. I didn't know that. Okay, hopefully that's not distracting. Anyway, so today I'm going to read through the U.S. Coast Guard OceanGate Board of Investigations document, like their findings. So obviously this is obviously OceanGate was a long time ago, but in I think August is when the Coast Guard released their report. So I did watch all of the hearings, and I did read through this 335-page report. I highlighted things that I wanted to talk about, and I don't know if I'm going to film this all in one go or if I'm going to split it up into multiple videos. I don't know. We'll see. Again, it's 300 pages. It's quite long. But okay, so with that, let us get into it. So again, actually, let me scroll down so I'm not making you nauseous. So I will link the report below. So if you guys want to read it, you can go ahead and do that. I'll link that below because obviously I'm not going to read through every single page of this thing because it is long. Okay. So I'm going to read through the executive summary for anyone who maybe doesn't know about OceanGate or needs a little bit of a refresher. I'm going to give you a little bit of a refresher via the executive summary. So 5 people died when the commercial submersible Titan imploded on June 18th, 2023 in what is considered to be a preventable tragedy. So they say that right up front, right? They say it's preventable, and I agree based on reading this report. Definitely. Okay, my nose is just running. Hold on one second. Okay, we're back. Sorry, anytime, I don't know why, anytime I start recording video, my nose starts to run. Anyway, okay, so they claim right up front that it is a tragedy and preventable. The U.S. Coast Guard's Marine Board of Investigations into the fatal incident found that OceanGate's failure to follow established engineering protocols for safety, testing, and maintenance of their submersible was the primary causal factor. The investigation further identified the need for proper corporate governance, a professional workplace culture, and improved regulatory oversight, in particular for novel vessel designs and operations. For several years preceding the incident, OceanGate leveraged intimidation tactics, allowances for scientific operations, and the company's favorable reputation to evade regulatory scrutiny. By strategically creating and exploiting regulatory confusion and oversight challenges, OceanGate was ultimately able to operate Titan completely outside of established deep-sea protocols, which had historically contributed to a strong safety record for commercial submersibles. I think something like, I don't know if they say it at all throughout here, I can't remember, but it was like a long time since the last kind of like incident like this. And I don't think there has been an incident like this. The lack of both third-party oversight and experienced OceanGate employees on staff during their 2023 Titan operations allowed OceanGate's CEO to completely ignore vital inspections, data analyses, and preventative maintenance procedures, culminating in a catastrophic event. Mission 5 of the 2023 Titanic expedition began at 9:31 a.m. on June 16th when the Polar Prince, which is the ship that was towing the submersible, departed from St. John's in Canada with 42 persons on board, 17 crew members, 24 clients, and 1 non-designated person. The Titan was secured atop the LARS, which is the Launch and Recovery System, and was towed approximately 370 nautical miles into international waters to the Titanic wreck site to conduct dive operations. The Titan was built in 2021 in Everett, Washington as a 22-foot manned submersible with an 8-foot long carbon fiber pressure hull glued to titanium end sections. owned by Cyclops 2 LLC, chartered by OceanGate Inc., and operated by OceanGate Expeditions. It was not registered, certified, inspected, or classed by any international flag administration or recognized organization. So it's very confusing, this business model. And to me, it just goes back to how kind of like sketchy the whole thing was, because they had multiple organizations to kind of, again, skirt around people paying for, because the second someone pays, it's a commercial vehicle and needs to be registered, certified, all of that. So there's all these like different one, and there was one that made sense, right? Where it was like, I think OceanGate Expeditions was the one that was like the kind of charity or like nonprofit aspect, and they would make donations to that part of the business to go down in the submersible. On June 18th, 2023 at 5:15 a.m., the Polar Prince arrived in the vicinity of the Titanic wreck site. The average speed, okay, I think I'm going to skip some of this. It just basically details kind of the day by day, but or the day by day, the hour by hour. But anyway, so they get in the boat, they go down, and at 9:14 a.m., the dive commenced. By 9:53 a.m., communication was lost with the Titan, and as a result, the Polar Prince of the communication. Do you see the Polar Prince on your display? 13 minutes later, at 10:08 a.m., the Titan responded with simple K, indicating a communications check. At 10:23, the support vessel and Titan at the depth of 2,800 meters exchanged messages regarding the submersible's position relative to the bow of the Titanic. They approached the ocean floor, releasing ballast weights to slow their descent. At 10:47 a.m., at a depth of 3,300 meters, the Titan messaged the Polar Prince, reporting drop 2 weights. 6 seconds later, at 10:47:08 a.m., at depth of 3,300 meters, the Titan sent an automated transmission that recorded its final location at these coordinates. At approximately 10:47:09 a.m., the Titan suffered a catastrophic implosion, resulting in the immediate loss of all lives on board. 2 seconds later, the Titan communications and tracking team on the Polar Prince heard a bang emanating from the ocean surface, which the investigation later correlated to the Titan's implosion. After that, all communications and tracking were lost. Okay, so the Polar Prince team was notified that they've lost communication, and the Polar Prince notified the Canadian Coast Guard at 7:10 p.m. Okay, so let's remember, they lost communication at 10:50 in the morning. Not until 7:10 p.m. that night did they report anything. And basically, the Canadian Coast Guard said you have to reach out to the Boston Center because they are the ones who are responsible for that particular section of international waters. Basically, then the whole search launched, right? So 11 vessels, 4 aircraft searched 12,000 square nautical miles of ocean for survivors and debris. And then on June 22nd at approximately 9:40 in the morning, they sent an ROV, which is basically a remote operated vehicle that can go down to 6,000 meters. They discovered the aft tail cone and other debris of the Titan on the seafloor. This discovery confirmed the catastrophic loss of the submersible Titan and the death of all 5 persons aboard. This is, I mean, this whole situation is so sad, and the fact that it was preventable is even more frustrating, I think, for a lot of people, myself included. And again, it's so sad that these people lost their lives, that their families lost their loved ones, and it was all preventable, which is just heartbreaking. Following the implosion, the 5 individuals aboard were exposed to approximately almost 5,000 pounds per square inch of water pressure, resulting in the instantaneous death of all 5 occupants. So, I think it gave some people reassurance, not reassurance, but I don't want to say like made them feel better, but they didn't suffer. They didn't even know it was happening. But yeah, still like just so extremely sad. Okay, so these are the main causal factors, which was OceanGate design and testing process for Titan did not adequately address many of the fundamental engineering principles that would be crucial for constructing a hull on the precision, necessary for the intended operations in an inherently hazardous environment. 2, OceanGate did not ensure any analysis was conducted to understand the expected cycle life of a Titan's hull, which essentially means how many times it can go to depth before they have to like replace it, do work, et cetera, or needs to be like fully taken out of commission. 3, OceanGate's excessive reliance on a real-time monitoring system to assess the condition of the Titan's carbon fiber hull, and then their failure to conduct meaningful analysis of the data provided by the system. So the real-time monitor system is essentially these like sound collection devices that are placed throughout the hull, which there's a picture of it later on. And it just basically just monitors the sound of the hull as they're going. And again, this is a huge component of the story. So we'll talk more about that in a bit. OceanGate's continued use of the Titan after a series of incidents that compromised the integrity of the hull and other critical components of the submersible without properly assessing or inspecting the hull. 5, the Titan's carbon fiber hull design and construction in terms of winding, curing, gluing, thickness of the hull, and manufacturing standards introduced flaws that weaken the overall structural integrity of the Titan hull. 6, OceanGate's failure to conduct a detailed investigation after the Titan experienced mishaps that negatively impacted its hull and components during dives conducted prior to the incident. 7, OceanGate's toxic workplace environment, which used firings of senior staff members and the looming threat of being fired to dissuade employees and contractors from expressing safety concerns, which is also just like so frustrating, especially because there was a whole whistleblower report to OSHA and that went nowhere, which we'll talk about too. And 8, OceanGate's failure to conduct preventative maintenance on the Titan's hull to protect it from the elements during the extended off-season layup period ahead of the 2023 expedition. Some other causal factors: OceanGate's safety culture, and operational practices were critically flawed, and at the core of these failures were glaring disparities between their written safety protocols and their actual practices. 2, OceanGate's CEO sustained efforts to misrepresent Titan as indestructible due to unconfirmed safety margins, and alleged conformance with advanced engineering principles provided a false sense of safety for passengers and regulators. 3, OceanGate senior leaders fostered an organizational culture that allowed mounting financial shortfalls, customer expectations, and operational demands to be prioritized over the mission director's authorities and responsibilities for each Titanic dive. And 4, the lack of comprehensive and effective regulations for the oversight and operation of manned submersibles and vessels of novel design that are constructed and or operated in the U.S. and navigable waters. The investigation also determined the absence of a timely occupational safety OSHA investigation into a 2018, exactly what I was saying, OceanGate whistleblower complaint, combined with a lack of effective communication and coordination between OSHA and the U.S. Coast Guard regarding Seamen's Protection Act protocols, was a missed opportunity for potential early government interaction ahead of OceanGate's planned testing of the first Titan hull. Early intervention may have resulted in OceanGate pursuing regulatory compliance or abandoning their plans for Titanic expeditions. And honestly, throughout this whole report, I will say, I think the Coast Guard also takes responsibility where they could have done better, which I actually appreciate, rather than, them just being like, it was all Stockton Rush's fault and like there was nothing we could have done. You can see like that they have, at the very, very end of this, whenever we get to that after the 300 pages, they talk about like, here are the plans of actions that we can start to take to make situations like this, not happen in the future, essentially. Okay. So again, I'm going to link this all down below so I don't make you dizzy. I'll put that off the screen. But yeah, so if you have not seen, this is what the vessel looked like. Again, it was a 22-foot long vessel. This next part goes through kind of like the specs of the vessel, where it was made, who was on board, which again were 5 individuals. And yes, so this first section is about findings of fact. Again, I'm just going to read through what I highlighted. OceanGate Expeditions promoted the missions as a longitudinal survey to collect images, videos, and laser and sonar data to determine an assessment of the rate of decay of the Titanic, which, they didn't do. They again use the guise of, we're doing research and we're collecting samples and we're doing all of this to kind of skirt around the rules and regulations, which is just horrendous. Okay, so you can see this is where they started in St. John's, and then this is where the Titanic is. So OceanGate expeditions to the Titanic took place in 2021 and 2022. The Titan had conducted a total of 33 dives, 13 of which made it to the depth of the Titanic and ocean floor. It was, like I said, undocumented, unregistered, non-certified, unclassed 22-foot manned commercial watercraft. Per the OceanGate Titan specifications page, the Titan could accommodate 5 persons with a maximum operating depth of 4,000 meters, which, again, as someone who is from America, even feet like this, it's hard for me to estimate, but it's like 2 miles down to the bottom of this particular part of the ocean, which is absolutely terrifying. So this is the Polar Prince that, for this, the specific incident was towing the submersible itself. It didn't have enough room and it didn't accommodate the submersible to be on the ship itself, so it did have to tow it, which they did not do in previous seasons. Again, you can see exactly what that looks like. And then they used these folks to support like getting the vessel ready, screwing them in, and also just being on top of the ocean water for, anything that was needed. Okay, again, I don't know how. Again, there's a lot of pictures if you want to go and look at that. They have like the schedule, then they have to talk about, which I definitely found interesting, was the cost. So 2 of the mission specialists paid $250,000 and the others paid $150,000 for 1 dive to the Titanic wreck site. The mission specialist companions each paid $25,000 to accompany the mission specialist on the support vessel, but did not partake in the dive itself, which I found very interesting. So they're charging people to just like accompany their loved ones, friends, family, whoever it was, just on the boat itself, which is insane. And they don't even get to go down into the dive. So according to OceanGate, quote, mission specialists are OceanGate's guests who help fund OceanGate expeditions. In addition to achieving research and scientific goals, OceanGate strives to ensure that mission specialists have the best experience possible when joining our team, end quote. So again, they're talking about the fact that they're donating and they are, mission specialists. They're not passengers. They're helping us research and, collect samples and, all of this stuff. And we'll talk about later that they didn't actually do any of that. So, they've got like schedules and stuff here, which again, I will share the link so you can go and do that. Again, this is like a very long document that I don't want to make y'all dizzy as I scroll through to find the next section that I highlighted. But yeah, I mean, it's just really frustrating. When I was reading this, I was just like, boy, bang. Okay. So this is also, if you haven't seen this video that the screen grab is from, I'll also link that below. And this was so sad to me. So quote, with the benefit of hindsight, I now believe I felt the Polar Prince shudder at around the time communications were reportedly lost, but at the time we thought nothing of it. It was a slight. In this video, also I find it interesting that they are blurring these people's faces. The one on the left is Stockton Rush's wife, who was the director of communications, I think, and tracking. And you can see like their reactions kind of like drop when it happens. But again, it's just, yeah. And okay. At 11:15 a.m., the master of the Polar Prince was advised that as approximately 10:47 a.m., there was a loss of communications with the Titan. The master of the Polar Prince stated in a written response to the MPI that, quote, this was not perceived to be an emergency by OceanGate, and that was communicated to me. The fact that, like, you'll see, I don't know how far after this it is, but they have like these like emergency protocols, right? And in my personal opinion, it is way too long to be waiting to like not hear from them and then send them another message and not hear from them. And again, we'll walk through that. Okay, perfect. It's right here. I read my mind. Okay, OceanGate personnel on board the Polar Prince followed the missed communications protocol outlined in the OceanGate HSE manual, which stated the following. 1, 15-minute communication checked, missed. 30-minute communication check, missed. 45-minute communications check, missed. Additional 15 minutes will be given for appropriate action to be taken. Internal contact and backup personnel will be called following 1 hour of no communications plus required service time for last known or assumed bottom depth of location. An additional 3 hours of local service search will be done before contacting outside emergency personnel unless circumstances merit a shorter delay. A grid search pattern will be done by surface vessel as directed by the mission director. Okay, so 10:50, let's make it 11, make it easy. Okay. They didn't call anybody until 7 p.m. That's 8 hours. Where do we see 8 hours on this? I don't know. And again, there were times, I think we'll read about this later at some point, where there were times where they lost communication, right? And that was normal because of instead of using the voice communication system, which was more expensive and whatever, even though that was industry standard, they would lose communication from time to time, which was not like out of the ordinary. But I'm sorry, waiting 3 hours, like and then actually waiting 8 hours to report anything. Okay. According to the Coast Guard officials, prior to launching the C-130, the Coast Guard's first attempt to coordinate search and rescue efforts were directed by the Polar Prince. However, and I find this super fascinating, the Polar Prince told the Coast Guard they were, quote, taking their tasking from OceanGate's mission director and were not going to do any active service searching directed by the Coast Guard. I'm sorry, what? You're going to trust these people who just don't have experience, and the Coast Guard, whose literally entire job is this? On June 18th, 2023 at 10 p.m., the Coast Guard Ice Patrol C-130 fixed wing aircraft was the first asset deployed from Canada, later to be joined by the P-3 aircraft with sonar buoys. Okay, so they reported this at 7 o'clock. So now it's 10 p.m. and they're just starting this more in-depth search. Which again, I don't understand. Again, this is not to fault the people of the Polar Prince, and I think, again, they're contracted with OceanGate, so it's not weird, I guess, that they would be doing that. But this, again, OceanGate portraying this as not an emergency is so I just do not understand. And then if you haven't seen this picture, this is when they found the submersible, which is just absolutely devastating. Okay, so I'm not going to read through all of these, but they do define what, small passenger vessel. They describe, again, a passenger is an individual carried in the vessel except the following: 1, owner or individual representative of the owner, or in the case of vessel under charter, the individual charterer or individual representative of the charter. The master, a member of the crew engaged in the business of the vessel who has not contributed consideration for carriage and who is paid for onboard services. Passenger for hire, defined as a passenger for whom consideration is contributed as a condition of carriage on the vessel, whether directly or indirectly flowing to the owner, charterer, etc. So again, and consideration here, when they mention it here, is basically that they paid, right? So again, they're trying to get around that by saying, we're doing research. Okay. So while submersibles that carry at least one passenger for hire are subject to 46 CFR subchapter T, the Coast Guard does not have inspection standards applicable to the design or construction of submersible vessels. And again, they talk about this later. The submersible industry is it's maybe not necessarily new, but commercial submersibles, where it's not a submarine that the government is using, etc. So there's not a whole lot of clarification or details. Again, there's not a ton of regulations from the government, but again, there are these classification companies that will classify your submersible to go down at certain depths. And again, they do not do any of that. To assist prospective owners with the process of certifying a novel design, which is like the carbon fiber hull because it had never been done before, the Coast Guard's Office of Design and Engineering Standards issued this policy letter to provide owners and operators with guidance on how to submit design standard equivalencies for consideration by the Design Business Agreement, or the DBA. Through the DBA process, the Coast Guard evaluates alternate arrangement or novel design proposals to ensure that the arrangement, fitting, appliance, apparatus, equipment, calculation, information, or test provides a level of safety equivalent to that established by applicable regulatory standards. If approved, a DBA serves as a standards framework for the design, plan review, inspection, and certification of novel vessels or floating facilities. An oceanographic research vessel, vessels that are less than 300 gross tons, may be designated or uninspected oceanographic vessels by the local OCMI in accordance to this, whatever bylaw or whatever. So again, because it's for research, it can be uninspected, which is how they're trying to get it, which was how they were trying to get around it. After determining that such a vessel is employed exclusively in that type of research, the OCMI must issue a letter of designation that is valid for a period of 2 years. This letter designates the vessel as an ORV, advises the owner and operator that the vessel must maintain exclusive operations in this research or instruction, and that any deviation from such exclusive use, such as carriage of freight or passengers, would constitute a violation of the inspection statutes. The Coast Guard policy for ORVs does not require a Coast Guard inspector to visit a submersible or surface vessel in person prior to issuing the designation letter. Although OceanGate had requested ORV letters for the other 2 submersibles they owned and operated, the company did not request a letter from the Coast Guard requesting that the Titan be designated as an ORV. As a result, an ORV letter of designation was never issued for the Titan. Also, a quick kind of recap, if you don't know, they started with the Antipodes, which is one that they the one that they bought and then kind of, I think, modified. Then they had the Cyclops 1 and Cyclops 2, which eventually became the Titan 1. And then there was the Titan 2, which, again, I think we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay. At the time of the casualty, Stockton Rush had held a Coast Guard issued master of 25 GRT, which again is the weight of the vessel, obtained on March 16th, 2020. The attainment of his credential was directly influenced by OceanGate's communication to the National Maritime Center in 2020, wherein OceanGate falsely declared the Titan submersible's gross tonnage to be 26 GRT in order to ensure that Mr. Rush had the requisite sea time on a sufficiently sized vessel to obtain his credential. Following the incident, the NBI requested a tonnage estimate for the Titan, but because of the detailed plans necessary for precise calculations, an official ad measurement could not be performed. However, an informal assessment estimated the Titan's gross tonnage to be 4 GRT. So again, not accurate from his own standards. Okay, again, I'm gonna do that so I don't make y'all dizzy. But so they also talk about the classification societies. Again, basically they have standards, they go out and they review and conduct testing and all of that to, again, certify and what they call class these submersibles to ensure that they're safe, that they can go to the depths at which they say they can go, and make sure it's safe for the passengers. Okay, according to a DNV surveyor, carbon fiber has not been acceptable as suitable material for the construction of submersible PVHOs, especially when subject to external pressure experienced at ocean depths. According to the DNVGL, carbon fibers are not considered suitable for significant compressive loading conditions. Accordingly, no equivalency standards have been developed for the type of application that was used for the submersible Titan. Again, this is a novel design, right? Meaning that it's never been done before, specifically for submersibles. Obviously, carbon fiber is used in a lot of other things and, whatnot. And I have no problem with like innovation and trying new things, but for something that is novel, that's new, that no one's done before, and where people's lives are at risk, you really need to be doing some testing. You need to get a class. You need to, have experienced engineers who are familiar with carbon fiber, which we'll talk about as well, because they worked with NASA, they worked with Boeing, they worked with a university lab that had more experience than they did. In an interview with CBS News correspondent concerning PVHOs, OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush stated, quote, "The viewport is made of 7-inch thick plexiglass acrylic. This is an area where I deviated from conventional practices." Again, so he's like flat out admitting that. Much of the submersible industry adheres to the PVHO standards, as they should, because they're standards for a reason, which function like a regulatory body, though it is actually a volunteer group that has established various guidelines. So again, he's kind of just dismissing them, and he was very dismissive of a lot of things. Not only the standards, but also safety concerns that were brought to him by multiple people across the entire company, across different aspects of the company, which again is just really sad. Okay, so there was this blog post written by OceanGate with the title, "Why isn't this submersible classed?" Again, classification is basically them having a third-party company come in and look at it. So I'm not going to read through all of this because it's a little bit more than I remember it being, but essentially they're talking about how it basically takes away the innovation. It takes a lot of time to go and get classed. I think it's relatively expensive, and basically he was like, we don't need to do that, which is just, okay, wait, so let me just read this quote. This is a good one here. OceanGate's original stated goals was to, quote, "pursue the highest reasonable level of innovation in the design and operation of manned submersibles. While classing systems are willing to pursue the certification of the new and innovative designs and ideas, they often have a multi-year approval cycle," which again just goes back to the fact that he wants this like crazy, like quick, get things done, innovate. And again, as someone personally who has like a pretty, I guess, low risk tolerance compared to Stockton Rush, I would want to make sure that if this was what I was doing, like, again, it's a novel design, not something that's been done before. He wants to make ocean exploration more accessible, more commercially available. You'd think he would want to like do it by the book, do it well. And I think it comes down to a lot of the like, they just didn't have any money. And this was another thing I highlighted. And this just like kind of pissed me off. He said once, "When you're outside the box, it's really hard to tell how far outside the box you really are." It's not hard to tell when you have so many people in the company bringing you safety concerns and you just fully dismiss all of them and fire them for it. It's just absurd. Okay. Before the Antipodes and the Cyclops 1 were properly registered in the state of Washington. Did I say that right? Both of them were properly registered. According to Washington state records, the Titan submersible was never registered in the state of Washington, and the MBI could not find evidence indicating it was registered anywhere else. So again, it's weird because they're doing it the right way in the beginning. And then because I can't remember if the Cyclops was the carbon fiber hull or not. The Antipodes definitely wasn't. The Antipodes was the original one they bought that could only fit like, I think, 1 or 2 people. So yeah, I can't remember if that was like that. But again, they're following in the beginning. So it seems like, again, he was trying to go about the right way. And then it just followed from there because they ran out of money and he wants to, start getting money in the door from these paying passengers. Okay. While operating the Antipodes, which is with its 300-meter depth limitation, Stockton and the co-founder were simultaneously working to solidify their vision and identify submersibles capable of reaching 6,000 meters. Through outreach within the submersible industry, they discovered that while manufacturers had the capability to build such vessels, the associated costs exceeded their financial parameters and were outside of their business management plan. The co-founder noted that a recalibration of their business model or the pursuit of more viable engineering solutions were necessary. Stockton opted to pursue the latter, initiating a shift in strategy from chartering existing submersibles to constructing new ones. This transition was conceptualized as a three-phase plan. First, to operate within the submersible sector using the Antipodes. Second, to gain expertise in submersible construction. And third, to develop a vehicle capable of deep sea operations. Okay. I don't know anything, obviously, about the submersible industry except from what I've learned here. I don't know how much these things cost to make, especially when they have they have a greater depth optionality, like they can go deeper in the ocean essentially. And I would be interested to know how much money they spent building it versus how much it would just be to purchase one. I don't know enough about that, and I maybe should have done my research on that, but because I don't know if it equals out in the end or if it truly is like so expensive where it's just like not doable. Okay, utilizing carbon fiber for the hull would significantly reduce the vehicle's weight and enhance buoyancy. This reduction in weight decreased transportation costs, which Stockton believed were the greatest costs associated with submersible operations. So again, getting it from one place to another, they have to essentially put it on a truck and take it, and depending on the weight, they said it's cheaper to do the carbon fiber because it's lighter. Okay, regarding the shape of the submersible, the ABS senior principal engineer stated, ABS is one of the classification societies, and this is one of their engineers that came in, spoke at the hearing. Quote, so typically what we have seen, and any time you go below a depth of 1,000 meters seawater or 3,200 feet, the shape of the pressure hull is spherical. We have not seen cylindrical pressure hulls being used beyond a depth of 1,000 meters. The reason is that a spherical pressure hull is the best shape for external pressure as the stressors are evenly distributed around the hull, end quote. A spherical submersible configuration can typically accommodate a maximum of 3 occupants. They strategically decided to design and construct a larger cylindrical submersible capable of accommodating 5 individuals. Again, more people, more money. This new design deviated from the traditional spherical configuration, adopting a cylindrical hull that provides increased interior space for crew members, equipment, passengers, scientific instruments. It was believed that a cylindrical hull would provide greater comfort and flexibility for the interior layout, catering to crew needs while optimizing the use of onboard technology. On October 1st, 2014, OceanGate Board of Directors unanimously approved a plan to establish a separate LLC. Again, this goes into this like weird business model of them having multiple different LLCs to handle different things, and it seemed like they were just like moving money from one LLC to the other. It was just very bizarre to me that they were like selling the Cyclops one to another entity that they had, and then it also talks about cash distributions. So 40% of all net income went back to investors until full capacity capital recovery, and a preferred 10% annual return. So again, this seems like a bad business model, okay? I, have a degree in business, 60-40 split, girl, he was so in debt to these people. And that's why there was just all of this financial pressure. Okay. The OceanGate's operations were partially funded by investments and revenue generated from individuals participating in dives. These participants have been referred to with various titles over the years, including citizen scientists and mission specialists. According to OceanGate 2023, quote, mission specialists provide financial support to underwrite OceanGate expeditions, end quote. The fees for OceanGate's mission specialists to participate in a dive in the Titanic wreck site significantly increased over time, rising from $105,000 to $250,000 for both 2022 and 23. I don't know if I highlighted this, but it's basically he adjusted it for the cost of inflation of how much a ticket to the Titanic cost when it was originally happening. Mission specialists were encouraged to actively engage in OceanGate's missions alongside the crew, their responsibilities including operating equipment. This girl, okay, let me just finish reading this. Performing maintenance tasks, drafting procedures, tracking operations, cleaning the submersible, charging batteries, and executing additional duties as directed by OceanGate management. According to the project execution plan, quote, this involvement, sorry, I don't know what that was in my tooth. This involvement not only financed expeditions, but also gave participants a direct engagement in deep sea exploration, delivering a unique and immersive experience in marine science. These unqualified people are operating equipment, performing maintenance tasks, etc. I do not understand that. I can understand them shadowing the people, again, even the people that were like working at this time were not qualified. I do not understand this. It's just absolutely insane to me. If I were, which I would never do this, if I were ever to do something like this and they were like, hey, do you want to do this? I'd be like, no, I'm not qualified. What do you mean you want me to operate equipment? Okay, moving along. Mr. Rush planned for future OceanGate expeditions to extend beyond the Titanic to achieve broader underwater exploration. This included the development of a new submersible capable of reaching depths of 6,000 meters. OceanGate aimed to diversify its exploration targets, planning dives to regions such as, I have no idea how to pronounce that, but other wreck sites and things like that. So again, they were planning to move beyond the Titanic. They talk about the board of directors. The board of directors was an absolute joke. Stockton Rush would just be like, this is what we're doing. That's it. No feedback. This is a quote from, who is this? Retired Rear Admiral from Coast Guard stated, quote, my best recollection of how the board operated was it was strategic-based board, not a tactical group of people. Mr. Rush was not a person who sought, to the best of my recollection, a lot of input for members of the board for direction. Again, just goes back to the fact that this was not a collaborative effort project. It was just him saying, we're doing this. If you don't like it, you can go. Okay, administration and marketing. According to the director of administration, OceanGate aimed to engage the 1% of the 1% and the ultra high net worth adventure explorers to take part in the expeditions. Because again, even though he wanted to make it accessible for, people, most folks aren't just going to be, a normal person like me is not going to spend $250,000 to go down into a submersible. I mean, I wouldn't do that anyway, but like, it's not like they're doing it for the average people. Okay. To participate in the 2023 Titanic expedition, mission specialists were required to sign a mission specialist crew agreement. The 6-page document outlined the qualifications and expectations for participants. Mission specialists had to either complete a 14-hour in-house training course or have prior experience with OceanGate expeditions. Additionally, the Coast Guard or equivalent credential was required. These requirements were listed in the mission specialist crew agreement, but according to previous mission specialists interviewed by this was the investigation board, these prerequisites were neither completed nor verified by OceanGate prior to the dive. They talk about this later as well, and it's basically them having to complete the trainings, but it was never checked by OceanGate. So they're telling them to do all these things to prepare and whatnot, and then they don't actually check them. Okay, OceanGate's refund policy, this is very interesting as well, prohibited refunds within 6 months of the expedition, with participants losing their full contributions if they canceled within 180 days of an expedition start, unless the cancellation was due to equipment failure, which would then result in a credit for future expeditions. These credits were non-transferable and could not be redeemed for cash. OceanGate's former director of admin and finance explained the company lacked the funds to process refunds because payments collected for expeditions were immediately used to cover operational expenses. Many mission specialists, when interviewed about the refund policy, either did not recall a policy or understood that once they made the deposit, it was likely not refundable. One former missions specialist recalled, quote, "It was pretty clear that once you started to give a deposit and you were signed on, then you were running the risk that you may not get your money back." The submersible had not, the liability waiver mentions death 9 times and includes the following key points. The submersible had not been certified by any regulatory body. The vessel would be subjected to extreme pressures during the dive with the risk of severe injury or death. A portion of the expedition would be conducted inside an experimental submersible vessel. Again, experimental. Mission specialists had the option to decline participation at any time. How is that an option if you're in the vessel at 3,000 meters? What, you can be like, I decline to participate? They're not going back up. OceanGate videos showed mission specialists for Dive 88 signing the liability waiver on the Polar Prince while en route to the Titanic wreck site for Mission 5 of the 2023 Titanic expedition. It is unknown if they received a copy prior to the mission. So I think they state this, maybe I might be getting ahead of myself, but they basically made it sound like this was pretty common where they would sign it on route to the dive. So it basically made them feel pressured into signing it, because if they didn't, they're already here. They've already paid all their money and they're just going to sign it. Okay, mission specialists were asked to complete a medical questionnaire, which included questions about their general and mental health, as well as prescription medications. This self-certification process did not involve a doctor's verification or a participant's ability to safely undertake a dive. However, a medical doctor was part of the expedition support staff. According to many of the mission specialists, the completed medical form was never requested by OceanGate, nor asked to be submitted to the company for verification ahead of an expedition. So again, they're asking, I think this is just like, again, them trying to put people under a guise of safety and concern for their well-being, and we want to make sure you're like healthy to go for these dives. And then they didn't actually check it, which is just, it's just so frustrating. Some former mission specialists interviewed by the committee stated that the pre-arrival training was never reviewed or confirmed by OceanGate personnel once they arrived on board. Some stated there was no vessel familiarization or mission specialist training completed while on board the SOAR vessel. They're so willy-nilly about all of this. For something that's experimental and new, it should not be like this. According to the manual's directive, it was meant to be distributed to all pilots and Titan operations personnel. Additionally, the manual states that it was made accessible to external contractors and regulatory bodies involved in overseeing daily operations in an effort to underscore OceanGate's commitment to transparency and compliance with industry standards. But they're not compliant with industry standards. So it's like, what are you talking about? Prior to the casualty, the manual was never provided to the Coast Guard, and the MBI did not find any evidence indicating that it was ever made to the Canadian authorities. And this is talking specifically about the manual for the dives themselves. Okay, at the time the pilot manual was provided to the committee, the majority of its sections were incomplete. Many of the essential functions were to be determined in the manual, and there was a watermark within the pages of the manual that were consistent with the fact that it was a draft. It literally has, you can see, like, when it's watermarked. TBD, 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 like, be so for real. Okay, according to a former director of marine operations, there was no pilot training manual for Cyclops 1 when he started working for OceanGate in 2016. Upon his arrival, he created the training manual to serve as a comprehensive guide for the submersible pilot training program at OceanGate. It was designed to ensure that trainees had a clear understanding of the program's requirements while documenting their progress and achievements as a pilot. The task book was intended to be used in conjunction with both the pilot training manual and the OceanGate operations manual to create a consistent framework for training. The primary objective of the task book was to track each trainee's accomplishments and outline any remaining tasks needed to achieve a code certification as a submersible pilot at OceanGate. Practical exercises were a critical component of the training, and each task had to be carried out to the satisfaction of the submersible operations director. This individual was responsible for signing off on practical tasks, lectures, and successfully completed written and oral exams. There is currently no submersible pilot endorsement available to prospective submersible masters. Federal requirements within these things do not require nor require any MMC or endorsement specific to the operations of a submersible. Many of the practical exercises in the task book were structured to be completed during a single dive, emphasizing the importance of hands-on experience. According to the former director of marine operations, once a student demonstrated mastery of the required techniques and knowledge, they would be assessed by a senior pilot or the director who would sign the relevant section of the task book to indicate completion. Upon fulfilling a written theoretical and practical requirements, students would receive a certification of competence. The structured approach not only ensured through training, but also fostered consistency in the development of skills necessary for submersible piloting. Okay. You might not know this. I actually work in training. I have done learning and development. I have my master's degree in education. I love that I'm using my lip gloss to point that out. It's crazy that there was no training for these pilots until this guy came along. It's crazy. The HSE manual stated that the company viewed safety not only as a legal obligation, but also a moral responsibility to ensure that every employee worked in an environment free from recognized hazards. Mr. Rush had the following quote in the manual. Quote, "The OceanGate HSE philosophy is that in the performance of our work, the health and welfare of the people involved and the protection of assets and the environment are the primary concerns." In all caps, no job is so important that we cannot take the time to do it safely. This dude is like delusional. I don't understand. OceanGate stated that incidents are avoidable through diligent adherence to safety protocols and continuous improvements to operational practices. Again, they're just not practicing what they're preaching. And it is, again, so frustrating because it was so clearly preventable. And I don't know enough about, like, in the beginning, was he, more willing to accept criticism? I don't know if it changed once he started to, when they shifted the business model to building your own submersible instead of buying them and operating them. I don't know what happened along the way, or if, again, it was the financial strains, the time constraints. Like, I don't know exactly what happened, but this is like bad. Okay, the HSE manual stated that employees were required to comply with all company safety rules and were encouraged to find ways to make the company safer. Employees were also required to attend monthly safety meetings, which were, I don't know if I need to read that. Okay, yeah, the meetings were intended to help identify safety problems, develop solutions, review incidents, provide training, and evaluate the effectiveness of the safety program. The meeting minutes were to be kept and maintained for a minimum of 1 year. The investigation team was unable to locate minutes related to the monthly safety meetings identified in the manual. No previous OceanGate employees or the retired naval officer or Coast Guard officer interviewed by the NBI could identify who OceanGate had designated as the company's safety officer. Because there wasn't one. There wasn't one. And again, this is something that, like, they stress in their own manual that is important. And obviously it is. But it's like they're not practicing what they're preaching. Okay, OceanGate implemented a 3-strike system for dives. If there was a total of 3 or more, quote, strikes encountered during a dive evolution, the mission director was required to cancel the day's dive operations. A strike was defined within the glossary as, quote, a major deviation or major problem encountered during a dive operation, including during pre-dive preparations, that is significant, but not by itself worthy of mission cancellation. Examples of strikes are weather worse than forecast, delays of more than 1 hour from the plan, last-minute substitutions of key personnel in dive operations, failures of equipment within the guidelines, and last-minute unscheduled configuration changes. Although the committee witnesses testified that Titan dives were canceled for various reasons, without reasons including equipment malfunctions and inclement weather, the committee could not find any written documentation of a dive canceled due to the three-strike system. So again, they've got this system. Great. And then there's no documentation anywhere that any of the dives were canceled due to the three-strike system. The mission director was also required to track, quote, anomalies over the course of the operation. If the number of, quote, anomalies exceeded 15, it was required to be considered a strike. An anomaly is defined within the glossary as, quote, any deviation from standard or expected performance, procedure, system setup that would not be expected in a perfect situation. Anomalies could have been as small as a diver member showing up late to a mission, a delay of more than 15 minutes in any planned step, or even missing a piece of required apparel. Okay. At the discretion of the pilot, the following list is acceptable. Oh my gosh, my foot is falling asleep. At the discretion of the pilot, the following list is acceptable to be inoperable before or during a dive. Wait, what? Oh, minimum requirements. Sorry. I'm like, when I was highlighting this, I should have done a better job of like highlighting, like I should have highlighted this piece where it was like minimum requirements. Also, sorry, it's not highlighting everything. Anyway, this basically just says like these things need to be operable before or during the dive. Okay. Part of the dive plan was to determine the risk index for the dive. The risk index was defined in the glossary as, quote, a score from 0 to 100 that incorporates a diverse potential risk increasing situations such as poor weather, night operations, new locations, or new crew. The index is used to focus on the team's attention to risk increasing components. The mission director may be able to reduce the risk index through several actions, such as adding a co-pilot, changing time, or doing a test dive prior to open water operations. The risk index was determined by reviewing each subcategory under the following 5 categories: vehicle data, location data, pilot data, team and project data, and client data. Each subcategory was given a weight or number based on its severity. If the specific condition existed, yes or no, then the weight or number was added to the risk contribution. You can see this is like the spreadsheet that they use below. Figure 50 is the risk index, where the risk was calculated to be 35. The MBI was unable to determine how the risk index number was computed based on the values indicated in figure 50. The committee was neither provided with nor able to locate any OceanGate documentation assigning a risk classification. Is 35 low, medium, or high? I'm assuming low-ish because it's out of 100. Corresponding to the calculated risk number. As a result, the significance of a risk index value of 35 remains unknown. OceanGate employees and mission specialists interviewed were unfamiliar with any formal risk classification systems or terminology. The average risk index for all dives was 36. Former OceanGate employees stated to the committee that the risk index scoring was determined by Rush, the mission director, who is his wife, and possibly the pilot of the mission. No other individuals provided feedback or insight to determine the risk for the dive. Again, they're just like making things up. And again, it just goes to show that these people, they just had very inexperienced people. Okay, so this is about the engineering division of OceanGate. Despite the team's growing specialization, there was a notable, I'm like really getting ahead of myself. There was a notable lack of experience in submersible design, as many of the new hires were either current college students or recent graduates. OceanGate enlisted engineering students from the Washington State University, Everett, to create a, quote, cost-efficient prototype battery system that would be both, quote, safe and affordable. Again, they've got no cash, so they're hiring these people that have no experience because they're going to be cheap. Okay, so this is the project that they had for the students. And again, I don't think this is like super, super important, but you can go and read this. It's basically saying, this is the abstract of the project, here's the description, and this is kind of like what we're hoping for you to build. The director of marine integration and operations joined the company as the first Titan submersible was preparing for its manned test dives in the Bahamas. Reflecting on the state of the project, he described the Titan as akin to a, quote, high school project, pointing out the inadequacy of its systems despite being marked as capable of 4,000-meter dives. He further remarked on the team's morale, stating that many were unhappy with their roles and ill-equipped to tackle the complexities of designing a sophisticated deep-sea submersible. A high school project. Like, come on. And it's just like, it's embarrassing, right? Like, I think it's great to innovate and try new things and get things to be more commercially available for people who want to do deep sea exploration, which is not myself. But then do it right. Do it by the book. From 2017 until 2023, OceanGate's engineering team experienced significant downsizing. In 2017, the team consisted of approximately 20 members. By 2019, 2 years later, this number was reduced to approximately 12, so almost half. As of 2023, the engineering team was comprised of just 3 members, an electronics engineer, an electronics technician, and a software engineer. No materials engineer, which I learned was a thing. According to the expedition plan, the position of director of engineering during the final expedition was still to be determined because they had fired the director of engineering before this. Or I think he left on his own accord, I can't remember. All 3 of OceanGate's directors of engineering stated that Mr. Rush made all engineering decisions independently, despite having a director of engineering in place. The most recent director of engineering, who left the position in February 2023, noted frequent disagreements between Mr. Rush and the engineering team regarding quality standards related to modifications. The last director of engineering stated that Mr. Rush often prioritized more cost-effective approaches and solutions, which led to ongoing tensions over project execution and safety. At the hearing, when asked who would make the majority of the engineering decisions, OceanGate's former first director of engineering said, "It was Stockton for sure. My job as the director of engineering is more about rounding up the cattle than it was about making all the choices, for sure." Like, he just wants to do everything himself. And he's not qualified. I know he has an engineering background. I think he was like aerospace previously, if I remember correctly. But like, what's happening? Okay, this is about the Antipodes. So they were issued a letter of designation for the Antipodes, which means they're allowed to go and operate. They do not limit the ORV to the geographic area within the OCMI zone. OceanGate then operated the Antipodes utilizing the Coast Guard sector, I think it's Puget Sound, from September 2010 to October 2010 on a Catalina Island expedition within zones. During the expedition, OceanGate collaborated with the Undersea Voyager project. While engaged on this project, OceanGate had an incident that damaged the Antipodes, which resulted in approximately $10,000 in repairs and termination of the collaboration with the Undersea Voyager project. An experienced underwater explorer and submersible pilot who had been hired by OceanGate to pilot the Antipodes stated that the incident he witnessed while contracted on the project suggested that the, quote, culture of OceanGate was one of safety is not important. On the 8th dive of the Voyage project, according to the hired explorer, Mr. Rush told him to sit the dive out so he could take his, quote, rich friends on the dive. Prior to the 8th dive, a crew member removed the battery pod vent cap. The removal of the cap was not identified during the pre-inspection, and when the dive commenced, the battery pod became flooded, damaging the batteries. The safety is not important. Wanting to take his rich friends. All, like, just crazy red flags. The Coast Guard Marine Safety Center conducted a review of the information provided by OceanGate pursuant to the issuance of the letter to the Antipodes. The Marine Safety Center sent a formal response on March 4th, 2011, stating that they would need additional information to assess the submersible for carrying passengers, the pressure calculations, as built plans and drawings, and supporting documentation requested by the Marine Center. Yeah, I mean, again, it's one thing for one person to say, you know, he was against safety, but it's just too many people now. Okay, on February 18th, 2020, the Coast Guard Marine Safety Center issued a letter to OceanGate stating that their request to be certified as a small passenger vessel had been disapproved. The denial letter contained the following statement. As currently, quote, as currently built, we have determined that the design does not meet the requirements of the 46 CFR subchapter T, nor does it provide a level of safety equivalent to that intended by existing laws, regulations, and policy. The next issuance of the ORV letter of designation to Antipodes was on July 11, 2020 from the Puget Sound. From August 13th, 2014 until July 11th, 2020, there were no letters of designation issued to OceanGate from any zones for the Antipodes. The silence is loud. Okay. How long have we been going? An hour and 6 minutes. Okay. Only on page 92. Okay, Boeing's preliminary design. So again, they worked with Boeing. They worked with NASA for a little bit. NASA? I can't remember. Anyway. Okay. Hold on. I don't remember. Where's my mouse? I can't remember. Okay. I was like, I can't remember if I wanted to read this whole section or if I just wanted to read the highlighted ones. Okay, so this is Boeing's preliminary design of the OceanGate deep sea submersible pressure hull. The initial goal of the study was to design a hull capable of 6,000 meters. However, the goal was subsequently revised to an 8,600 meter operational depth. So even greater than the 6,000 meters. At a depth of 8,600 meters, the external pressure was calculated to be approximately 12,562 psi. The required wall thickness would be about 9.3 inches. However, an open hole structure indicated a negative margin of 83%, necessitating over 32 inches of wall thickness. Therefore, it was crucial to ensure that the carbon fiber, I don't know what that accent was, carbon fiber reinforced polymer cylinder remained free from perforations, or impact damage. The report stated the structure will need to be carefully inspected for manufacturing defects such as porosity, voids, inclusions, and foreign object debris. The report discussed buckling, indicating that thin-walled tubes under external pressure are vulnerable to compressive loads that may cause buckling. Boeing was able to determine the ultimate carbon fiber hull layout mathematically for the vehicle. The report stated that an effective curing method for the composite hull throughout the manufacturing process, while important, presented significant challenges. The design assumed the vessel would be used to its full depth capacity, and the report emphasized that it was crucial to understand how pressure would affect the hull over time. The report stated that one of the most critical components of the design was the bounded joint between the composite hull and the titanium segments, which were the end caps. The report emphasized that more research was necessary to understand how this type of joint behaves under these conditions and how the applied loads impacted the adhesive bond. Okay, so again, they worked with Boeing, they provided the report, and they ended that relationship because I think it was too expensive and because of COVID, or maybe Boeing ended the relationship because of COVID. But they're pointing out all of these issues and saying there needs to be more research, you need to really test it, you need to have this level of thickness to be able to reach this depth. Like, they were doing what they needed to do from the Boeing perspective. Okay, then we have the University of Washington Applied Physics Lab. This, I'll read this first one. The principal investigator developed a collaboratory initiative to create a bridge between industry and academia, enabling companies to access university research that would typically be inaccessible. The initiative aimed to connect businesses with the expertise they lacked, especially in high-tech fields. This collaboration began with OceanGate utilizing their existing submersibles for an obstacle avoidance program of the official Office of Naval Research. For a deep sea submersible with a budget of almost $5 million, they intended to collaborate with OceanGate on the development, construction, launch, recovery, testing, all of that for the Cyclops. Again, they basically were going to use the facilities on the University of Washington. This was kind of the, Gantt chart for the plan. The project engineer stated that his understanding of the intent of the research proposal was to provide engineering expertise to OceanGate. They proposed they would work to ensure the safety of the submersible, the engineers, and test personnel. It stressed that safety would not be compromised in any aspect of the design, fabrication, or testing. Again, they're stressing the importance of safety. However, the university's representatives noted that the data collected was not shared with them, as it was only shared and discussed directly between Boeing and OceanGate. The collaboration between OceanGate and the university was terminated due to ongoing engineering disagreements, prompting OceanGate to assume full control over the engineering aspects of the project. Again, I don't know why I didn't highlight this, but they expressed reservations about using glass spheres for housing the propulsion motor controller pod for the manned vehicle. They were concerned about the reliability of the glass spheres in general applications, and they highlighted a concerning history of unexpected failures of the glass spheres at significant depths. Given the extreme pressures associated with the depths, they concluded that using glass spheres posed unacceptable risks, particularly in a crewed context, despite their potential suitability for shallower submersible operations. The team was also still attempting to address hull failures observed during third scale testing. These failures had not been fully understood or remedied, indicating that the design needed further refinement. Also, third scale testing is basically where they built the submersible into a third and tested. So they're not building this whole 22-foot submersible and then testing that and it, not working. So again, they called out these like questionable aspects of the design and engineering. Okay. On April, hold on, what section is this? Okay, so this is Cyclops 1. On April 30th, 2015, the Cyclops 1 was conducting a test dive in Everett Marine in Washington with members from the university on board when they experienced a malfunction of the latch for the starboard hatch. According to the internal OceanGate safety event near miss report filed for the incident, the description of the issue is as follows, quote, after the loading of the submersible while still at the dock, the sub-pilot, Stockton, was unable to physically move the starboard hatch latch mechanism to its fully engaged position. It was able to be moved externally, but may not have been able to be released from inside the sub without damaging the actuation lever. The pilot engaged the latch as much as possible from the inside, then attempted to force open the hatch. Being unable to open the hatch with one latch engaged, and then with the second latch normally seated, he was confident that there was no chance for the hatch to leak or unseat. However, the external personnel could see that the starboard latch was just barely engaged, and some members were vocally concerned about the anomaly, end quote. The mission director for that dive incident the mission director for that dive incident decided that the decision to proceed with the operation was a pilot decision and decided to continue ahead with the dive without 100% consensus from the group as to the safety of partially latched starboard hatch. According to the subsequent analysis within OceanGate's near-miss report, the handling of the incident highlighted significant concerns regarding safety culture and decision-making protocols for dive operations. While the functional aspect of the hatch engagement was deemed not to pose a safety risk, the absence of team consensus before proceeding was considered a critical procedural failure. The pressure to proceed, influenced by the pilot's dual role as CEO and the presence of VIP guests, created a, quote, get it done mentality that undermined safety practices. The pilot's awareness of dissenting opinions further emphasized the need for leaders to prioritize safety over operational pressures by reinforcing that all team members should have a voice in safety critical decisions. Okay, also, anytime they're saying mission director, that again is his wife. So I think he basically was able to just override her. Again, even though all of these people were saying, hey, like, I don't feel comfortable, I'm concerned about this. Yeah. Okay. Stockton stated in a podcast, we do dives in the Puget Sound looking for 6 gill sharks for $5,000. Again, they're just admitting that they're doing these dives for money. Stockton stated, encouraging the first potential client committed to the $20,000 fee for a 2-day experience, including 1 3-hour dive, along with 2 additional participants at the same fee. Again, talking about how he's doing these dives for money, which is not a problem, except he's not following the guidelines and the rules associated with paying customers. In testimony regarding the Andrea Doria expedition, the OceanGate Director of Operations, who served as the assistant pilot to Stockton, described a critical moment during the dive when the Cyclops 1 became stuck under the bow of the Andrea Doria wreckage. The assistant pilot stated that Stockton experienced a, quote, meltdown and refused to let him assist in resolving the situation. When a mission specialist suggested that Mr. Rush hand over the controller to the assistant pilot reported that the controller was thrown at him. Upon obtaining the controller, the assistant pilot was able to free the Cyclops 1 from the wreckage and safely navigate it back to the support vessel. This is, I can't remember his name, the Australian or New Zealand guy who had plenty of experience in submersibles and that industry. And I think Stockton was threatened by him and insecure, like made insecure because he had so much experience and he was reporting all of these safety concerns and actually was able to, get them out of this tough situation. And I think Stockton was just a big fucking baby. Okay, continuing on. Okay, so this is about the 1/3 testing. The first one collapsed. It was a catastrophic failure. Okay. Then he goes and writes a letter, and he's basically, saying it failed, whatever. Okay. The failure of the composite end cap prompted OceanGate to discontinue the use of composite end caps in favor of metallic alternatives, specifically titanium, aluminum, or steel. These materials would undergo testing over the next year to evaluate their compatibility with the pressure hull vessel. Mr. Rush underscored the achievements made so far, emphasizing that OceanGate's core business model prioritizes, quote, extreme efficiency. And the project engineer from the university stated the second one was also a catastrophic failure, but I believe it was the dome that failed rather than the cylindrical section. They reported that the failure occurred at 4,000 psi when the top end cap imploded. So again, you can see all the testing. This is the fourth 1/3 model scale test took place at the university. The invoice indicated that a total of 7 hours of testing was completed, with an additional 12 hours charged for cleanup and repairs. The pressure testing notebook recorded that the pressure vessel imploded at 6,000 psi, which equates to an ocean depth of 4,304 meters. So again, I don't know at this point if they were trying to go to 6,000 meters, but they definitely wanted at least 4,000, right, to be able to get down to the depth of Titanic, and you can see it absolutely destroyed. Okay, in response to the committee questions about post-failure discussions regarding design improvements, the university project engineer stated that they were not part of those conversations. However, when asked if they would recommend constructing a full-scale hull without a successful 1/3 scale model test, they suggested that it would be prudent to continue testing the 1/3 scale model until achieving success before proceeding to full scale, which makes sense. Why would you not know that it won't implode until you've completed the testing and it can reach the depth at which you want it to? The 1/3 scale models tested for deep sea pressure did not meet the requirements for a full-scale design rated for 4,000 meters. According to OceanGate's director of engineering at the time, he urged Spencer Composites to make modifications to the models and to continue testing, but Spencer Composites declined his request to modify the whole design, maintaining confidence that it would withstand the pressures despite the observed 1/3 model failures. I don't understand how you can contract with a company and they're going to be like, we're not doing that because we know it'll be able to withstand the pressure, even though the 1/3 model had failed multiple times. A proposal was made by the director of engineering to Stockton to create a new 1/3 scale model using titanium for the end domes, with estimated costs of $100,000 to $150,000. But this plan was ultimately denied. This 1/3 scale models were tested and managed to withstand pressures equivalent to 4,200 meters, which was less than the 4,500 meters that was the target max pressure depth for the Titan operations. Overall, while the models demonstrated potential deep sea capability, they fell short of the expectations outlined in the design specifications. Okay, I am going to take a quick break. I need to use the restroom, and I will be back in just a second. All right, we're back. Okay, let us continue. Okay. Okay, so this is about the relationship between OceanGate and operations and the engineering department. So the two internal teams. The director of operations characterized the working environment at OceanGate as, quote, toxic, stating that Mr. Rush and the COO and the engineering department would brush off any concerns he raised regarding serious failure points. On November 17, 2016, an email exchange between two engineers from the university highlighted a significant disconnect between the operations and engineering departments at OceanGate. One university engineer noted that noted to his colleague that during a visit, it was apparent that the director of engineering was reluctant to engage with the OceanGate operations team, describing the situation as, quote, palpable, and expressing confusion about how the organization functioned effectively under such circumstances, which is true. These departments need to be working very interconnectedly for a project like this, right? Operations and engineering is building, and operations should understand how it's being built, why it's being built this way, give input, feedback. And they were doing that, but they were just clashing. They did not agree. They were not working well together. In correspondence between the university members, that the following statement was made, quote, "My take then is that OceanGate is looking to implement an unproven technique on a human-inhabited vehicle. It might be fine, but there is no history of data or testing to back that up. Given that, I am inclined to respond with thank you, but the university respectfully declines." And decline means decline at all. Battery selection, control system design, new device integrations like the acoustic modem, cameras, etc. When the following director of engineering was asked about the relationship between OceanGate's engineering and operations teams, he described it as severely dysfunctional, stating, quote, "They didn't talk, they hated each other." He recalled that both directors expressed animosity towards each other, saying things like, quote, "That guy's a horrible guy," and they were quick to blame one another. The director of engineering observed that there was no communication between the teams and stated, quote, as far as I could tell, they didn't talk at all. They did not share any information, which is like, just again, like a huge red flag. These teams should be working so closely together as building it and operating it go hand in hand, right? The engineering team adopted a secretive stance, making assertions like, quote, no, this is my information. I'll give you the sub when it's ready, and you don't need to ask any questions. Meanwhile, the operations team felt uninformed, obviously, with a member expressing their frustration in the following statement, quote, we don't know anything. So, how do we know if it's any good? You want us to dive, but we don't know what to do. This lack of collaboration and clarity further complicated the project's progress, obviously. The director of operations noted the engineering department often withheld information from the operations team, which created significant barriers to effective collaboration. Furthermore, when serious concerns were raised with Stockton, the COO, and director of engineering, the concerns were, quote, immediately dismissed, indicating a troubling lack of responsiveness to critical issues within the organization. This culture of secrecy and disregard for operational concerns contributed to the ongoing dysfunction between the teams. So again, it's not even just like they're not following engineering standards, protocols, whatever. Also internally, they can't even have a constructive conversation about how to build this, how to operate it. Like the whole, we'll give you the sub and you'll do it is insane. The director of marine operations stated, quote, as an experienced engineer and operator of submersibles with over 25 years of experience, I believe my concerns were dismissed due to the cost-cutting measures and poor engineering decisions, driven by the desire to reach the Titanic quickly to start generating profit, exactly like we've been saying the whole time. There was a clear push to expedite the project, which led to critical steps being overlooked. These concerns were not just mine, but also shared by other experienced professionals, including names redacted, both seasoned submersible pilots. Despite voicing these concerns, we were disregarded. The dismissal of safety concerns by experienced operators is highly abnormal and unacceptable in the submersible industry. Unfortunately, the organization lacked the necessary expertise, with most of the engineering team being inexperienced, fresh out of universities, or even without formal education in submersible design. The leadership, including the CEO, had no prior experience building submersibles, which was evident in the engineering flaws and subpar decisions. Despite my efforts to address these issues and transform the company into something credible, it became clear that the focus was more on image and marketing than on building a safe and reliable operation, end quote. Again, this is like, I can understand why, especially if you've seen any of the documentaries or seen any of the Coast Guard, hearing this guy, again, I can't, you know what, I should probably just look up his name so I'm not forgetting it. OceanGate, Australia director. Why is he? Okay, hold on. Okay, my laptop is so. David Lockridge. Okay. I sense he just wanted this to be successful. He was excited about the opportunity, and I could feel his passion. Obviously, he'd been doing this for 25 years. He was super knowledgeable, super experienced, and he was excited about the opportunity to, innovate and try new things. And he had the best of intentions with this. Again, he was, I think, the most experienced person within this organization. Again, like it said, they didn't have any expertise in things like materials, engineers, or submersibles at all. And this is like a super highly specific industry, right? It's not like, something that's a little bit more broad, and like in engineering, obviously they have specific specialties, right? Like that's what engineering, there's so many types of engineering, and you can't just hire any engineer to do any role, right? There's like specific sections within engineering that people are hired for and study for and all of that. And especially because he's the one who filed the OSHA complaint, I just felt so bad for him because you could just tell, like, he just wanted the best for this expedition and this whole like innovation process, and it just didn't work. Okay, so this is the manufacturing of the carbon fiber hull via Spencer Composites. You can see this is how it's made. The thickness of the carbon fiber epoxy hull was 127 millimeters, approximately 5 inches, which was less than the 6 inches planned for earlier models, such as Mr. Fawcett's Craft. I don't remember who that is exactly, but which was rigorously tested and demonstrated the ability to endure pressures up to 2.5 times its surface operating pressure, of 6,500 psi. The carbon fiber material used for the Titan hull was standard modulus, this exact, supplied by Mitsubishi Chemical Carbon Fiber and Composites. Again, you can see this is what it looks like. And just, they had to, like, this is how it came out. And then this is when they sandblasted it, which is basically like sanding it down. Okay, so this is about the titanium domes. The titanium dome was initially designed to be grade 5, but was ultimately made from grade 3 titanium. The decision to switch from grade 5 to 3 was made by Mr. Rush due to the higher cost. Oh, let's go back to that. And longer lead time. Again, money, time. They didn't have either of those things, apparently. It would take twice as long. However, its strength is moderate compared to other titanium alloys. So again, they're lessening the grade and quality of things because it's more expensive, or it's less expensive, and they don't have as much time. A former OceanGate director of engineering noted that an O-ring was added to the forward segment, which connected to the hinged forward dome. However, Mr. Rush deemed it unnecessary, believing that the metal-to-metal seal would be sufficient under high pressure. During the 2018 exit interview of the Director of Marine Operations, Mr. Rush identified the titanium dome as the weakest link in the Titan's design and voiced serious concerns about the potential for someone to be struck seriously and seriously injured by the dome. Again, this whole thing, the 2018 exit interview, this was when David Lockridge was basically being fired because he had done this whole safety report and review. And there's a recorded, I think, like 2-hour conversation, which I have not listened to. But yeah, he basically was calling out all of the things, and again, just being dismissed as always. And I've listened to, like, I've heard some clips of it, and you could just really like feel his frustration. And I do, again, like I said, I just felt so bad for him because again, he wanted the best for this, and he tried his best to like call out these concerns, and as he should, right? Like that was, again, with his experience, like it's, I'm sure, natural to him to just be like, hey, like this is, what I think, and they just completely dismissed it. Okay, so this is, what is this about specifically? Hold on, let me scroll back up. I think it's the glue. Yes, okay, it's the glue. Okay. So this timeline of events reveals both consistency and uncertainty in the materials and procedures used during the submersible's construction. The use of this specific glue was confirmed, but the lack of clear documentation in 2017 raised questions about whether proper procedures were followed during the earlier stages of the project. As the development of standardized processes unfolded in 2021, a more methodical approach was adopted, but gaps in prior practices may have contributed to concerns about the overall integrity and safety of the adhesive application process. So again, lack of documentation, lack of like, here's everything that's been done so we can like, look back at things and whatever, like just none of that. Terrible organizational management. Okay, so this is about the acrylic window. In 2017, OceanGate initiated the design and procurement of a specialized acrylic window for the Titan. In June of 2017, OceanGate submitted a purchase order to Hydrospace Group to create a 23-inch acrylic dome designed for use with PVHO materials certification. The window was intended to meet certification requirements and was priced at $33,000. That's crazy for a little window. However, OceanGate specifically requested a conical external facing structure shape and flat internal facing shape dome window, which would provide better viewing from inside the submersible. This window design, as proposed, was not an approved PVHO geometry, meaning it did not comply with established pressure vessel standards for human occupancy. They had a whole engineer come, and I don't know if it was from the Hydrospace group or if it was just, I can't remember exactly who it was, but he basically showed, and again, I'm not like a math and engineer person, but basically it was saying like it would have been a failure. Okay. Then they move into a window manufactured by Heinz Fritz. And OceanGate changed the viewport option without the testing and certification documentation. So they went to a new company instead of, just listening to the experts. They stated that the review of the Titan's viewport window design and pressure rating was conducted after the implosion. After involving an unnamed party, the calculations were redone, and it was found that the viewport met the safety standards for the operating depth at the Titanic wreck site. So again, they're saying it met the requirements, but it's interesting that the other company said it did not. Okay, then we have the real-time monitor system. So this is RTM. This system is a set of acoustic sensors and strain gauges placed throughout the hull to provide real-time health monitoring to the pilot of the submersible. He obtained a patent for the system, which she, okay, girl, like whatever. The director of engineering said the hardware was designed by a board member, blah, blah, blah. It would send samples of sound waves through the hull many times per second, providing incredible accuracy and allowing us to assess the health of the hull during the dive. On June 5th, 2018, a professional engineer from the Acoustic Emission Technology Consulting wrote a letter of affirmation to the director of engineering regarding the use of the acoustic emission to help with averting an impending failure of the Titan submersible. The professional engineer stated that the acoustic emission real-time monitoring of the Titan submersible should be able to detect an impending failure sufficiently in advance to prevent catastrophic failure. He further stated the Titan's acoustic emission system has much more than the minimum requirements to accomplish OceanGate's objective to create an early notification of impending failure. Again, a great addition, right? Like they can understand if things are not going well, but they didn't really do a good job of analyzing that data or anything like that. When asked whether the RTM alarms could be included an audible alarm in addition to the colored bar graph, a former OceanGate director of engineering stated, "There were no audio alarms. We wanted to do that, and Mr. Rush was totally against audio alarms. He didn't want them, but we wanted to do them, but we didn't." I think this stemmed from him not wanting to concern passengers. And I can understand. But at the same time, I feel like, again, with their whole wanting to be transparent and blah, 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 shouldn't they kind of understand the risk as well? It's just bizarre. Okay. The RTM systems for the Titan hulls did not include a capability for OceanGate communications and tracking team members who monitor dives from a small command and control center on the bridge of the vessel supporting Titan's dive to receive the RTM or review the alarm levels in real time. So again, they're the only people seeing the RTM system is the pilot, and that's usually going to be Stockton Rush. The project engineer from the university testified to the board or to the committee that the data from the RTM system, when properly characterized, could provide valuable insights into the hull's structural integrity. The data could support maintenance decisions by identifying the need for non-destructive testing or determining if the hull had reached its operational limits, possibly requiring retirement from service. Again, like I said in the beginning. However, the project engineer clarified that the system was not designed to predict an impending catastrophic hull failure during a dive. Instead, the RTM system enabled a historical assessment of the hull's condition to facilitate informed decisions before each dive regarding its sustainability for planned depths. The project engineer believed that the system should have solely been used as a preventative tool, not a real-time safety alert system. So this is, they show the different sensors. 3 of them were not working, which is again another like, girl, what the fuck. And you can see here that they have some of the kind of graphs. You can see like there's spikes, and essentially if there's a spike, it means obviously there's more sound. And there were times, we'll probably read this later, where people would hear this kind of like banging or snapping sound, and that's literally the carbon fiber snapping, like breaking. Okay, so 4 strain sensors, 3 failed and could not be accessed due to their placement under the insert, leaving 13 working sensors out of 16. The former director of engineering also clarified that, quote, once the systems were glued in and inserted and the insert installed, the sensors remained in place for the life of Titan and were never replaced, or were not replaced. Okay, let me see if I've got anything highlighted for the LARS, which is basically where the Titan is stored and used to push off from. No, I don't. Okay, next we're moving on to the Director of Marine Operations report firing and whistleblower filing. Again, this is David Lockridge. I find it really interesting that they're not using people's names except for Stockton Rush. I'm kind of confused by that. Okay, the Director of Marine Operations for OceanGate were responsible for ensuring the safety of crew members and clients during both submersible and surface operations. The role also involved managing and maintaining all marine assets to ensure mission objectives were met during complex expeditions. As an experienced submersible pilot and chief pilot overseeing all operations and personnel, the individual's contributions were crucial to the safe execution of OceanGate operations. However, David Lockridge, who filled the position from 2016 to 2018, reported being largely sidelined by Mr. Rush and the Director of Engineering at OceanGate at the time. Despite his extensive experience with submersibles and his broad OceanGate oversight responsibilities, his safety concerns were often dismissed. These dismissals, coupled with challenging internal company dynamics, undermined his ability to prioritize personnel safety and perform his duties effectively. David Lockridge frequently raised safety concerns to the Director of Engineering, but his concerns were often met with hostility. As an example, he observed critical components arriving to the warehouse and identified potential failure points, which he promptly reported to the responsible OceanGate employee or contractor. However, his warnings were largely ignored or dismissed. David Lockridge also described a toxic work environment in which Stockton undermined the operations team, further complicating efforts to address safety issues. The lack of support for his concerns and overall culture with OceanGate created significant operational challenges, especially given the high-risk nature of the submersible missions. And again, like, how can it not, like, feel, like, shitty to be like, hey, I've got all this experience and none of you have any experience, and you're ignoring all of my concerns, you're meeting me with hostility when I'm trying to, you know, call these things out. And it just goes back to the fact that Stockton Rush instituted this, like, fear and dismissive attitude and nature of any concerns because he wanted it done quickly, low cost, no pushback, and he made all the decisions. And if it's like his way or the highway kind of situation. Okay, well, OceanGate was preparing for its first expedition to the wreck site of Titanic in 2018. David Lockridge was tasked with inspecting the Cyclops 2 submersible, which was later renamed the Titan. Okay, so Cyclops 2 is the first Titan. He began his inspection in December 2017, and on January 18, 2018, submitted a report highlighting critical safety concerns. He made it clear that with the submersible being handed off from the engineering team to the operations team, it was an opportune time to address these safety issues. In his report, he outlined 26 components that required corrective action or further attention, expressing concern that until these issues were addressed, the submersible should not be used in any upcoming trials. Okay, so first of all, huge amount of things that need to be fixed or addressed. And obviously, this is the whole like 2-hour interview or 2-hour conversation with him and I think the Director of Engineering and obviously Stockton Rush. Like it's just crazy. According to David, he believed it was important to document these findings and ensure that OceanGate management took them seriously before the submersible was put into operational use with human occupancy. Again, he is concerned for the people, not only the OceanGate people, but the people who are paying to go down in this submersible. Okay, so this is his report. I'm not going to read through all of it, but he basically identifies all of these problems and things that need to be addressed. Again, he has 25 years of experience. I think he knows the things that need to be addressed. Okay, the report included a detailed quality control inspection of the Cyclops 2, which identified numerous safety concerns, particularly with components that were not up to operational standards essential to the deep sea operations. These concerns were not just theoretical. He believed they could pose a significant risk to personnel if left unaddressed. The report was an official record that highlighted the necessary corrective actions. So it's not only him saying this is wrong, but he said this is wrong and this is how we can fix it. Which again is being very solutions oriented. It's not like he's just like, this thing sucks, like you need to fix it. Like he's giving you the solutions essentially, and they just refuse to take them. The report was an official record. According to David, his intention was to provide OceanGate with a clear and documented account of the issues that needed attention before any further operations took place. His emphasis was on ensuring that the submersible was safe to operate, reflecting his primary concern for the well-being of the crew and mission personnel. On January 19th, 2018, he met with Mr. Rush, the Director of Engineering, an HR rep, and the COO for a 2-hour meeting. Again, this is when I was reported. During this meeting, David argued for additional testing of the Titan submersible hull and emphasized the need to address the safety concern outlined in his report. Although the meeting was crucial to ensuring the safety operations of the new submersible, there was no formal response or any subsequent actions taken by the CEO or OceanGate in response to the inspection report. David's recommendations, however, were met with strong resistance and disdain from Stockton and other senior company officials. Following the meeting, it became clear that Mr. Rush that he and the director, David, were at an impasse regarding how to move forward with the submersible's development, and he notified the director of operations that he would likely be fired. The meeting lasted 2 hours and 4 minutes and was audio recorded by the CEO. So it wasn't even like David Lockridge recorded it. It was the CEO. The recording was obtained by the committee. After his termination, also if you want to listen to that, it is linked here too. After his termination, David Lockridge filed a retaliation complaint with OSHA on February 6th, 2018. Okay, so this is years before the catastrophic event. Okay, so he's like, again, he's not only like concerned and filing this report with OceanGate, he then takes it to OSHA because he is so concerned. This again just shows that he has very good intentions. He really wants this to work out, but he's worried for everyone involved. He alleged that his dismissal was in retaliation for raising valid safety concerns regarding the Titan hull's development and testing plans. He argued that OceanGate had violated the Seamen's Protection Act, which safeguards employees for retaliation for reporting safety issues in the maritime industry. By filing the complaint, he sought to hold OceanGate accountable for dismissing him rather than addressing the serious safety risk that he identified, especially Stockton's plan to test the first Titan hull at Titanic equivalent depths with himself and others on board. In response to the OSHA complaint, OceanGate filed a lawsuit against David Lockridge on June 25th, 2018, with 6 causes of action. The lawsuit accused him of violating the Employee Intellectual Property Agreement, which he had signed in conjunction with his hiring in 2016 by sharing confidential information with OSHA. Yeah, I mean, just so ridiculous. According to the OSHA investigator handling the complaint against OceanGate, he was experiencing a significant backlog of other whistleblower investigations when the OceanGate complaint was filed. The OSHA investigator also stated the following during an interview. Quote, another thing that I remembered about this case when the company filed the lawsuit against, again, I don't understand why they're not just using their names as if they're, it's so weird to me, against David Lockridge. That was a big red flag for us. I had another case where that happened and it's considered a slap lawsuit, which is basically that way. And most states have an anti-SLAPP lawsuit, a suit law that says you can't basically intimidate people with lawsuits who are exercising their right under the law to file a complaint with the government. As a result, the investigation into the complaint against OceanGate was never started by OSHA after the evidence was received from both parties. On December 13th, 2018, David Lockridge withdrew his complaint against OceanGate, citing the emotional toll of the ensuing legal battle and stating that he and his wife had simply wanted the ordeal to be over with due to the lack of progress on his case. Which again is just so sad. Like, he is so passionate about this and he wants to ensure the safety of the people on board the submersible, the people who are paying, the crew, everybody at OceanGate. And he's just fully dismissed by OceanGate. OSHA is basically like, we don't have time for your case. And it's just so sad. Okay. You know what? I might stop here because we're almost at 2 hours and I'm only like halfway through. So I'm going to wrap it up here and then I will continue another day. Maybe I'll record this weekend. But let me know your thoughts so far. Again, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you're still here. If you are still here, leave me a comment with a little fall leaf or something Halloweeny. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, weekend, evening, morning, whatever, wherever you are. Thank you for listening to me yap for 2 hours, or if you watch it on whatever speed for however long that is. I appreciate you, and I will see you later. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down below to be notified when I am ready to yap more, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.